All right, I think we are all here. You ready, Scott?
I am ready.
Awesome. Bear with us with some confusion as we're switching live event platforms. So I'm not a tech person. So today, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Lynn. I am a customer service rep here at WarmlyYours. I'm also joined by one of our tech guys.
Scott, hello. Thanks for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here, Scott. Today we're talking about some installation tips for heating tile floors. So if you have any questions on this or want to, kind of chat about an upcoming project, feel free to type away in the chat. We would be more than happy to answer any questions. If we don't get to them right away, we'll definitely address them by the end of the presentation. So we're going to be going over kind of a general introduction to floor heating, especially, our electric floor heating products. And then we're going to talk about heating with both TempZone Cable and TempZone Flex Roll. So we're going to show you two different ways to get electric floor heating underneath tile floors. So I want to start off talking about the benefits of floor heating. And obviously, there are quite a few of them. I think that there's a kind of common misconception that it's not especially energy efficient. And really, that's not true. It tends to be even more energy efficient than traditional forced air systems. You only have to heat where and when you need it. And you're also going to be helping to reduce allergens and dust and air movement throughout the house. And it's also incredibly easy to install. If you're already replacing a floor, adding some floor heating is not going to be a much extra step, and it's going to give you all those benefits in the long run. So some of the systems that we offer are TempZone. That's going to be either mats or loose cables, and that's going to be great for under tile, stone, most hardwoods, vinyl, and things like that. We also have Environ, which is a foil-backed mat, and that's great for under carpet if you're in the States, and floating floors, engineered wood, things like that. And then we also have in-slab concrete heating in both mats and loose cables as well. So today we're going to be mainly looking at our TempZone products. So can you kind of tell us, Scott, what to consider when you're looking at heating a tile floor?
Yeah, well, I love this picture here because one of the for people who haven't done this before, just a word of advice: don't try to figure it all out on your own. Simply just give us the dimensions of your room, and we will do an installation plan for you for free. Won't cost you anything. You usually get it within 24 hours. And we do common things like getting under that toe kick. You want to make sure that you get under the toe kick on that cabinet on the right side because you don't want your feet to be warm but your toes to be cold. So you get your heat there under the toe kick. And also you don't want to put the system too deep. You want to make sure that the heating wires are within an inch to an inch and a half of the top of the tile. That way, it gives you the maximum amount of warmth because the heat only radiates about an inch and a half from the wire itself. So if you bury that wire 3 inches deep, you're not going to be getting much heat. So what you want to do is you want to get that up in the upper layer in the thin set, 1 to 1.5 inches from the tile, from the top of the tile. If you look there at the back of the picture, if that is a closet, you do not want heat in the closet. Uh, Unless your local code authority says you can, because it's against the National Electric Code to put floor heating in closets. So if you want to heat your closet, make sure you ask your local code authority or authority having jurisdiction if that is allowed where you live. And also there, we can see a shower on the left side. Do you want to heat that shower or not? If you do, just let us know. Our product is wet location listed, so you can put it in the shower if you wish. So make sure that you plan on the thickness of the cable. You don't not the cable, but the thickness of the tile, because you don't want a really thick tile there that's going to get the wire too far from the top of the tile surface. And the most important thing is, and the reason why I led off immediately with getting a free installation plan, is you cannot cut the heating cable. So if you have too much, if you guess incorrectly, then you may have extra cable and you can't cut it. So that's why we always ask, do you have any cabinets? Because you can't go under cabinets. You can go under the toe kick, but you can't go under the cabinet itself. So those are the things you want to look out for. Send us a sketch of your floor. Show us where your products are going to be sitting on top of the tile. You stay out from under that. If you want to go in the shower or not, you can see that there is a shower bench there. Let us know if you want to heat the shower bench, because you can do that too. A lot of people do that because the bench, shower bench, can get very, very cold. And that's why you want to plan on heating that if you can. So those are just a few of the things you want to look out for when you're planning your installation.
Absolutely. Awesome. So looking at our TempZone systems, like I said, we have TempZone Cable and Rolls. So this is going to be the I should rephrase that. This is a great system for, like we said, underneath tile and stone and things like that. And both of these are great options, either using the mat or the cable. Just kind of depends on a few different factors, how much you want to pay or what your budget is for the system or for the remodel, and also how much labor you want to be doing. Obviously, cables are usually a bit more economical, but can be a little bit more labor intensive and time consuming. So we're going to be going over both of these options and kind of walk you through the steps for each so you can make a really good informed decision for your project. Both of these are wet location listed, so they're ideal for bathrooms. Obviously, bathrooms and kitchens tend to be the places that you see tile floors the most, and these are rated to be put in those areas for sure. They're not going to be, I think a lot of people get concerned about electric floor heating in a bathroom or shower, and they're rated for that. That's what these are made for. It's perfectly safe.
And the system's on a GFCI protected thermostat too.
Yes.
So you're not going to get shocked.
So looking at TempZone cables first, this is going to give you a lot of flexibility in your design. So I've also seen this used in rooms that are, kind of circular or have weird juts and turns and things like that, so that you get a lot of flexibility and you can really heat around whichever areas or however you need to. So this is going to give you a little bit more coverage than you could get with the flex rolls, because obviously those are cut and turn and they're not going to fit into as many spaces. And then can you kind of tell us a little bit about these fixing strips and what they do?
Yeah, the fixing strips have been around about as long as cable has been around. I think cable was like one of the very first products that came out years and years and years ago. And you can see there that you have the cable fixing strips, and these heating cables are not going under that tub. You don't heat under the tub. You stay away from that area because you have to worry about drains. You have to worry about hot water pipes. You have to worry about cold water pipes, that sort of thing. So you don't want to be going under the tub or around where those pipes are going to be drilled through the floor. If you put in a floor heating system and you drill through it, you're no longer going to have a floor heating system. So you want to take special care to look out for that. But if you have a round room, if you have a room that's got a lot of nooks and crannies, it's going to be faster to install it with these cable fixing strips, and you can attach them with double-sided tape, or you can use screws, or you can use nails, or you can use um, staples, that sort of thing, to attach those to the floor. And then you string the cable back and forth between those cable fixing strips. And that's what gives you the correct spacing. Those little knobs that are on there are 1 inch on center. So for every knob you use, that's your spacing that you're going to be. And it looks like I can't really see. Yeah, these are at 3 inch spacing. So this floor was installed at 3 inch spacing. It's going down there in those two spaces. And if you have a run of, that's maybe 3 or 4 or 5 feet from strip to strip, then you're going to want to take some masking tape and just run it over those cables to hold them down and hold them in place while you thin set or self level over the top of them.
Absolutely. Can you use cables with a little bit closer or further apart spacing?
Yeah, you can. That's what's so great about the cables, is you don't have to use 3 inch spacing. If you are over a cold area, like if this room right here, if this were over an unheated crawl space, then you'd definitely want to do 3 inch spacing. And if you are on the second floor above a kitchen, and that second floor already starts at a temperature of like 72 or 74, you don't need as many watts per square foot to get that floor on the second story to heat up like you would on the first floor over a cold area. So that would be a prime job upstairs that you could do a 4-inch spacing. If you go beyond 4-inch spacing, you sometimes can have some mixed results. So the best spacing is 3. And if you're on a second story, just a general, just a general, I want my floor to be warm type thing, then 4-inch spacing is probably okay upstairs, unless it's a room that's got 3 exterior walls, if it's got cathedral ceilings, if it has a fireplace, if it has a bunch of skylights. Those types of rooms are full of heat loss, which means those rooms are harder to heat. So you'd have to go, I need to get the wire as close as possible, 3 inches in this room, because I've got all these things that are going to figure into how warm the floor is. So that's something you want to keep in mind, that if you have a floor that's in a room that's got really high ceilings, it's got a lot of exterior walls, and in those exterior walls, there are a bunch of giant windows, and we see bathrooms like that all the time. Those rooms are hard to heat because they have a lot of heat loss. Every wall, every window, every skylight, every item like that is an area where the heat can escape. So the heat that your floor is making, it escapes through those things, especially an exterior wall that has an exterior door in it, because as soon as you open that door, all the heat goes out. So those are the kind of things that you want to look out for. You say, "Hey, my bathroom's on the second story. You told me to use 4 or 5 inch spacing." Not always the truth. You want to make sure it doesn't have a bunch of heat loss before you do that. So those are the kind of things. If you can give us your dimensions and tell us what kind of room it is, and if there are any things like that, we can get you the right product.
Perfect. All right, so TempZone Flex Rolls are next, and these are ideal for quick, easy installation. The cable is pre-spaced at 3 inches already, so you are good to go for pretty much any kind of application, whether that be a first floor, second floor, 18th floor, whatever you're doing, that 3 inch spacing is going to be great. And these do come in 2 different widths. There's 1.5 and 3 foot widths. And this is also part of, kind of getting it into those tighter spaces, or having that flexibility in the layout and design of the actual heating system itself. This is something that you want to make sure that you are installing. Again, you want to make sure you're getting the size product that you need. And what we offer is, or are smart plans. These are complimentary next day plans. And I think we get into them a little bit more in a moment. But these are going to actually show you specifically, for the cable how to run it, or for the flex roll exactly where you'll be cutting and turning it. And you can see on the mesh, there are definitely areas you can kind of cut into without cutting the cable, just making sure that you're protecting that cable. You want to install it wire side down, and that you're following the heating diagram so that you know exactly every step of that install for these flex rolls.
Yeah, the thing to keep in mind is the 3 foot widths are available in 240, so 240 volt, and they
Yes.
are for installing into very large rooms, because it lets you install that twice as fast if it's twice as wide. So mostly those are 240-volt rooms, and they are done in large spaces, and usually they're large rectangular spaces. So those are when the 3 foot widths are being used. Because if you have to do a bunch of cuts and turns with the 3 foot wide, then you're going to start running into trouble because it's just so big and so wide. So that's where you are going to be using that 3 foot width instead of the 1 foot 5 inch width. And if you look there at the spacing on the mesh, we talked about it's 3 inch spacing. Earlier, we said the wires, the heat travels an inch and a half from each wire. That's why the wires are 3 inches apart, because the one wire will reach an inch and a half, and the other wire will reach the other inch and a half, and then you have nice, smooth heating all the way across. As those get further apart, you start to have cold, slightly cooler areas in between the wires. The further apart they get, the more cool gets in that area between them. So that's why we normally don't go over 4 inches. And when you get to 5 inches or 6 inches, you're just going to have cold stripes down between the heating wires. So that's why they are spaced at 3 inch spacing, because the heat travels an inch and a half from the wire.
Good to know. All right. Cross sections. These are some of my favorite ways to picture floor heating because I think it gives you a really good idea of the steps and what you'll be looking at during the installation process. So, starting out with the TempZone Flex Roll, can you kind of show us or walk us through each step of this cross section?
Yeah, what's common is the subfloor being wood. So on that wood, you have to have fixing strips to hold the cable in place with the cable system, and the mesh holds the cable in place using the rolls. So you can see if you have the wood subfloor, you have to put the fixing strips down first. Then you take the cable and you string it back and forth between the strips, and then you put thin set over it, and then you set the tile. Um, on the left, you have that subfloor, the flex roll, the modified thin set, and the tile floor over the top. Always make sure you remember to install your floor sensor, and it goes into that open loop that you can see. It doesn't run over the heating wire, and it would do the same thing on the right. It would run into the open loop area, never running that wire over the heating wire.
Wonderful. So now, TempZone Cable, obviously, this is pretty simple and very similar. You're starting out with those fixing strips, and those can be attached directly to the wood subfloor, correct?
Correct. Yep. By
And then
nails or screws or staples.
whatever works, absolutely. And then you'll run that TempZone cable back and forth. You'll cover it with that thin set again, and then the tile like you normally would.
A lot of times they do like the single step or the two-step method.
Mhm.
9 times out of 10 with most of our customers, they do the two-step, which is where they put the product down on the subfloor. They adhere the subfloor, they adhere the cable or the mesh to the subfloor. When you're attaching the flex roll to the subfloor, you're going to want to use hot glue. Hot glue is the best thing, or you can use staples if you go into the mesh. You never ever staple over a wire. I don't care what you say, you can't guarantee that you're going to do it safely. You never ever staple over the heating wire, and you never ever staple over the non-heating lead, which is the lead that runs from the wall, from the thermostat, down the wall, across the floor, over to the heating wire. So never ever use staples on the wire, but you can use staples to hold the mesh down. Because remember, we suggest that the cables are installed cable side down. If you put the staples over the top of that mesh, it will not let the cables up because you're holding the mesh down and the cables under the mesh. So, but for safety's sake, the best thing to use is hot glue with the flex roll, and and the fixing strips with the cable, obviously.
Alrighty, and then now for a concrete slab or concrete subfloor, there is another step that you'll want to do first. And can you kind of tell us why you would want to lay out some kind of insulation over the top of that slab?
Yeah, you want to uncouple the heat from the slab, because the slab, if it's touching the cables, will pull the heat down into the subfloor. And well, people say, well, in the old days, they used to heat the slab. Well, they did, but they used higher wattage. This is 15 watts per square foot. It's designed to go in thin set on top of, you're directly under the flooring, because you want it within an inch to an inch and a half of the top of the tile or whatever your surface is. So you don't want it down in the concrete, and you don't want the concrete down below it to absorb all the heat. You want the heat to go upward. And the best way to do that is to put a thermal barrier between the concrete and the heat. And that means you're using Cerazorb, which is a synthetic cork, and it's got a higher R value than regular cork does. It also is a synthetic product, which means it won't harbor and cause mold to grow or help mold to grow. There's nothing there for the mold to eat. It's all synthetic. So you want to get that on there. And that's why, it's great in bathrooms too on concrete slabs, because we know the water spills, you get water splashing and that sort of stuff. On those floors, you don't have to worry about that Cerazorb getting wet because no mold's going to grow there. So that's what the Cerazorb is for. You adhere the Cerazorb to the concrete subfloor using modified thin set, and that's the same for the cable or the mesh. because all you're doing is you're attaching the Cerazorb to the subfloor using modified thin set, and then you're installing the TempZone or the TempZone cable or the flex roll on top of it, and then covering that with modified thin set and then tile.
Perfect. So all of our thermostats come with a complimentary floor sensor. That does come in the thermostat box. That is something that you might not think is something you need to know, but is a very important tip. A lot of people call in worry that they didn't get a sensor, and it is in the thermostat box. It's kind of hiding, so just make sure that you grab that first. You want to make sure, if especially if you're not doing the install yourself, if an electrician or a flooring contractor is, you want to make sure that you give them that floor sensor that they can install it at the same time and in the same location as the heating. This needs to be at least 6 to 8 inches into an open loop. And that means obviously that it's not, you never want it touching or running across or running, on top of any kind of the heating, any part of the heating wire. Um, and this is kind of shown here. Obviously, you can see it's not all the way out in the center of the room. It's kind of just, again, 6 to 8 inches into that heating area is all you need to get a adequate reading on that sensor to tell exactly what temperature the floor is putting out. Can you tell us a little bit about floor sensors and backup sensors, or why those might be wanted or needed?
Yeah, some people want to install a backup sensor just for the peace of mind, but the thing is, you don't want to, you install them both and you run them both up the wall, never ever in the same conduit as the leads for the floor heat. They need to go either in the wall or their own conduit. And then you only attach one to the thermostat. If you attach both of them to the thermostat, your thermostat will not work because the ohms readings coming up from it will be wrong. They'll be off. So your floor will think it's 150 degrees when it's really only 65. So you cannot attach both of them, but you can install both, run both of them up the wall, and it's in their own conduit, and then leave one of them, one of the wires balled up in the back of the box, and one of them attached to the thermostat. And that way, that once it gets put in and it gets put in correctly, I don't think I've ever seen one go wrong, um, or go bad. What happens is sometimes they get dinged when the person is using a trowel or something. They'll cut through the wire, or when they're trying to get it in the wall, they'll pull it too tight and catch it on a piece of conduit and get a short or something like that. So that's what you want to look out for. So you're more than welcome to get a backup sensor. You're probably not going to need one, but if you do decide to get one, make sure that you get only one installed and one of them coiled up inside the box. Also, one thing about where you want to put the sensors, you want to put the sensor somewhere on the floor that it's not going to get hit by the sun. You don't want to put the sensor in an area where the sun hits, because then when the sun's out and it's hitting the floor, the sensor is going to say, oh, this floor is 110 degrees. I don't need to turn on, but the rest of the floor where the sun isn't hitting is 50 degrees. The only problem is the sensor is going, hey, it's nice and warm here. Yeah, but the rest of the room isn't warm. So that's what you want to watch out for. You want to place it somewhere where the afternoon sun or the morning sun or whatever it is doesn't hit that sensor, because it will cause your system not to work correctly.
Absolutely. And if you're like my house, you'll always know where the sun is on the floor because the dog is right in that spot every single time.
Exactly. And I'm glad you brought that up, because you wouldn't want to put it under an area that has a dog
Yes.
bed or a cat bed on top of it either, because those areas get 10 or 15 degrees warmer than the remainder of the floor. So you could have an 85-degree area under the dog bed, or the floor hamper or whatever happens to be there, and or the mattress or anything like that. And that spot will be warm and the rest of the room will be cold. So that's something you want to do too. Don't put that sensor where something's going to be sitting on the floor all the time.
Definitely. So, looking at the actual beginning of the installation process, can you kind of tell us how you test your system to ensure that it's working? Because I've been seeing actually more and more people attempting to wire the system up and turn it on and heat it before it's embedded. And I want to go over a good way to test it without having to potentially damage it by heating it up first.
You never turn the system on before it's covered with thin set and tile, and you never turn it on until that tile, thin set, has cured, which
Yeah,
could be 7 days, it could be 14 days. The last thing you want to do is roll it out and then test it, and then it doesn't get hot enough, and you call and say, "Hey, my floor isn't working." Well, your floor is working it's just not, there's no tile there to hold the heat in the floor. It just goes all straight up into the air, so that the heat doesn't even reach the sensor. It just goes straight up. So yeah, when somebody calls and says, yeah, I turned my floor on, uh, one of the first things we ask is the floor covering over it yet? If they say no, then we immediately say, well, stop. You're not going to be doing any testing anyway. What you need to do is you need to test your system with a digital ohm meter. And the digital ohm meter is the item that you're going to use before you install it, in the middle of your installation to make sure everything is good, and then at the end, so you can write that number down in the installation manual. That'll be your proof of a good installation. And whenever you're not using the meter, you're using the circuit check, because you test it with the meter, you put the circuit check on, turn it on, then do your installation. Then when you're done laying it out, take the circuit check off, test it again the second time. If everything tests good, you can now put flooring over it. You don't want to install flooring over the top of a system that doesn't work. And the only way you're going to know if it's working or not is to do the ohms test. So if that passes that test, you can then put the circuit check back on again and then start to put the thin set in the tile over the top of it. If you happen to cut the wire, the circuit check, what it does is it's making sure that you have a heating circuit, and it's making sure that there is not an open circuit. And it's also going to make sure that there is not a short circuit. And a short circuit is from the heating wire to the ground. There's two wires inside that heat up, and there's a ground inside. So there's three wires. You want to make sure the two heating wires never touch the ground, and you want to make sure that the two heating wires always have a connection. And that's what the circuit check does. So if that circuit check says, hey, everything's good, at the end, you do your test and it says, yep, your ohm readings are good. You write those numbers down in the installation manual, and that is your record of a successful installation. If you have to get a meter, you have to. So there's really no question about that. To follow the instructions, you have to have a digital ohm meter. The one you want to look for is the one that has the knob on the front that has a bunch of things on the front that to turn to. You want a digital ohm meter that has an ohm section that's got 4 or 5 different values, because you want to turn it to 200 or you want to turn it to 20K, and you don't want to buy a self-ranging meter. The more expensive the meter, the more problems you're going to have. So we suggest getting an inexpensive meter that works and has a knob on the front you can set to the 200 range of ohms, and one you can set to the 20,000 range. The 20,000 range is for testing your thermostat sensor, and the 200 is for testing most of the flooring product. So you're going to need both of these if you're going to install.
And these are not expensive items, are they? I mean,
No.
if you're looking for a digital ohm meter, you don't need to get the fanciest one. Actually tends to be, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, they tend to be actually the cheaper ones are the ones that you're going to be looking for this kind of product and
Yeah.
installation.
Yep. As long as they work, that's the main thing. But we run into people all the time. I've got this really expensive brand X meter and it costs me $500. The only problem is that meter is self-ranging, and sometimes it'll catch the 200 range, but then when they go to test the sensor, which is between 8,000 and 18,000 ohms, the self-ranging part doesn't find it, and it says your sensor's bad. It's no, the sensor's not bad. Your meter that costs you a fortune isn't going to the 20K range. Well, these inexpensive meters, this one was $20, lets you tune it to the 20K range, and then it will give you the number so you can confirm that instead of hitting range, 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 trying to find it, the reading. Get an inexpensive one. The more we historically find that the people that have the most problems doing their range, doing their measurements, are the ones that have the expensive meters and the ones that have the analog meters. And analog meters need to go away, because these meters now are so inexpensive. You don't want the meter on the front with a needle going. It's impossible to get a floor ohm reading using a meter with an analog needle on it. So please don't even try to use those.
Good tips. So we're going to be going over a project that was done using TempZone fixing strips and loose cable. So obviously, this is the heating system is the cable, and the dimensions of the entire room that was being heated is about 123 square feet, and the heated area itself was about 94 square feet. Can you kind of tell us what the discrepancy is?
Yeah, you never heat the entire space. The floor, no one ever stands against the wall. So there's no need to heat right up against the wall. That will save you the cost of the product, and that will save you the cost of the electricity. So usually you only heat about 80-85% of the room. And that's why this number is askew. That's why the total area is 123, but the heated area is only 94, because you just don't need to heat right up to the wall, and that'll save you on electricity. Electricity every month.
While still heating the room. That
Right.
much less is not going to be the cause of the room feeling, extra cold or something like that.
Put the heat where your feet touch it.
So if you're like in the Blair Witch house and you're standing against the wall, I guess maybe you would want it there.
Exactly. Right.
It's Halloween. I'm thinking all those horror movies now.
or if you're going to a school dance and all you ever do is stand right up against the wall, that's about the only time the wallflowers would get cold feet. And they
Don't
already
call me
have
out.
cold. They already have cold feet. That's why they're wallflowers.
Oh my gosh, that was actually really good. All right, anyway, so the power requirements for this size area, again, about 94 square feet of heating, you're looking at just about 1400 watts, 11.63 amps. So this is all going to be on one 15 amp non-GFI breaker. Keep in mind the thermostat is a GFCI thermostat, so you want to make sure that it's not going on a GFI circuit.
And every floor heating project is not 240. That's another common
Yes.
misconception by a lot of electricians. Homeowner will say, I've got floor heat, and they'll instantly put in a 240-volt circuit. A small room that's under 120 square feet doesn't need a 240-volt system. 240 volts is not more efficient than 120. It's the same. So you're going to get the same heat out of a 120 system as you do a 240 system. And for smaller rooms, that way you are only using one breaker space instead of two. So that's what you want to keep in mind.
Yes, and these are not especially expensive to operate. I kind of touched on that earlier, but you can definitely see it here. Per hour, this whole room, based on, averages of electricity rates, you're looking at about 5 cents an hour to heat this space. Or if you're running it for 8 hours a day, maybe it's a home office or a kitchen, something like that, you'd be looking at about 40 cents for the entire day of nice warm room, nice warm flooring, nice warm toes.
And the thing is, if you're in that room only 4 hours a day, you're using half of that amount of electricity. So it can be very inexpensive.
It definitely can. And you only have to really be heating when you're in the area. It's not the kind of thing you need to be pumping hot air in kind of constantly.
Well, that's what we were talking about at the very beginning about how it actually is more energy efficient. What you can do is not every in a lot of homes, not everybody is in every room of the house all the time. A lot of people have a basement that never gets used except during the holidays, or there's two extra bedrooms that never get used except during the holidays. Well, if you're turning your central heat up to 70 degrees, you're heating the basement, you're heating those two spare rooms and the rest of the house, where what you can do is you can turn your central heating down to 65, and then just use the heat in the area where you sit. So if every time you come home right after work, you sit in the living room, there's no need to heat the rest of the house up to 70 degrees. You turn the central heat down to 65, and then you turn the floor heat on in the room that you're in. Then every night at 9 o'clock, you have a heated bedroom and a heated living room. The heated living room heat can go down and the bedroom heat can go up. And then that way you're doing this and you're using the same amount of power, but the entire house isn't keeping really hot. It's just the spaces that you're in.
Yes, it's definitely a great system to use. So this is actually the smart plan that I had kind of touched on earlier, and this is what a smart plan with cable and fixing strips is going to look like. As you can see, there is I think you can see my mouse, correct? Okay, so this is the start of the cable. This is going to be where it ends. So you'll want to make sure that you're starting the run where it's marked and that the thermostat and floor sensor are being put in that same area, again, per the drawing. One of the most important parts and one of the coolest things about these cables, I think, is the halfway mark. Can you kind of tell us what that is and what the point is?
Yeah, the red dot on the plan matches up with a white dot on the red cable. So you know that if you're doing your installation and all of a sudden the white spot on your cable is coming up uh, 10 feet to the left of that red dot on the plan, you know that the heating wires were installed too close together. If that white dot appears on the second half of the room, you know that you've used too little cable and you probably did 4-inch spacing instead of 3-inch spacing. And now you're going to have too much cable at the end. Those are the people that call us and go, I've got too much cable. Can I cut it off? And the reason why they say that is because they installed it at a different spacing than what they were quoted. So you want to watch out for that. What's so good about this product is, remember, you don't have to heat right up against the wall. So if you don't have enough heating cable, you can pull it away from the walls a little bit. You wouldn't want to be 1.5 feet from the wall. But if you look at some of these spaces, they're only 3 inches from the wall, or in one spot it's 6 inches from the wall. Remember, the heat travels 1.5 inches from the cable. So that 3-inch space there in the toilet, that's really only about 1.5 inch sliver of unheated space at the side of the wall there. You can bring the coverage in and eliminate a couple of those runs because you don't have somebody standing against the wall in the toilet room. So that's where you're going to be able to pull it away, use less in one spot to move it to another spot. Remember, you always want the heat where your feet are, and then you can stay away from areas where your feet aren't going to be. You always want to stay away from areas in front of doors. You never want to run it right up to the door, because what happens is if there's a transition from a carpet to the tile in the room, there's going to be a transition strip there. And later, after you install this, they're going to install the transition on top of that, and they're going to put a nail through the wire that's right there in the doorway. So you keep it out of the door and keep it away from the walls. And then that way you can go, hey, you know what? I've got too much cable. You can go, you can pull, you can fill excess areas. Like if they have too much cable, look for areas where there is no cable installed, like the area to the left and the right of that toilet. You can install cable there as long as it's 3 inches away from each other. And as long as it's 4 inches away from the wax ring, you shouldn't have any problem. So you've got a couple feet there on each side of the toilet you can use excess in. Also, you have a 6-inch gap there inside the toilet room from where the cable is on the left wall. You can see there's a 6-inch gap there with a green 6 with a 6-inch mark there. That means you could probably get 2 runs of cable right there to fill that space. And so on and so forth. You can get rid of extra cable by putting it in areas that aren't shown, or if you don't have enough cable, you can pull it away from the walls to get it into the area where it's really needed.
Definitely.
Because we don't really care about stepping on a cold spot from one room to the other.
Sure.
You just don't want to step on a cold spot inside the room that you're in.
Definitely. Yeah, that would be unpleasant for sure.
Mhm.
So these fixing strips are attached to the subfloor any number of ways that works. I've found that different people have different luck with different types of attaching it. So people will use screws, concrete nails, double-sided tape. Is there, obviously you've done a lot of these installations, Scott, have you found that there's any really good way to do this, or, what would you recommend?
It depends on the subfloor that you have. So if you've got a wood subfloor, if you have I know a lot of people use staples. They can staple right through the side there. But if you can also use, if you have a nice wood subfloor and you got some nice short screws, you can screw. There's a hole right in the center of each one of those holes, or each one of those knobs. You just put a screw in real quickly, like every 4 inches or so. You don't need to put one every single one. You put it every 4 or 5 inches, and that'll hold it all in place. Could you go back one slide, because we have to talk about those strips and where they're put in there. So
Yes.
you see where the great big tub is, it looks like a TV. Um, there, right in the center at that bottom of that TV looking thing, there's a 4. That 4-inch marking shows you how far the strips are installed from that wall. So if you get this spacing correct, your plans will be correct and your results will be good. If it tells you to put it 4 inches from that space, and all of a sudden you know what, I'm going to put that 6 inches from that space, you're going to have too much cable at the end. If you put that 1 inch from the tub, you're going to run out of cable at the end. You have to install it the correct amount of distance from the wall. So look at that bottom left corner there. You walk in the door to the bottom left, you see 4.5 inches there to the left. That has to be 4.5 inches from the wall to the cable fixing strip. If you make that 6 inches, you're going to have too much cable at the end. If you make that 1 inch, you're not going to have enough cable at the end. So that's why these distances are all shown on your plan to make sure that the cable rests on the floor like it's shown.
Awesome. Scott, can you adjust your mic a little bit? It's getting muffled, I
Muffled?
think.
Okay, I can do that.
That's
We'll try
better.
that.
There we go.
Okay.
I don't know what that was. So this is again, they're spaced an inch apart on center. So for 3 inch spacing, you'll just wrap those cables every 3 notches, and it's pretty simple, pretty easy, and it gives you again a lot of that flexibility as needed. Next is going to be installing the cable. So once these fixing strips are down, you'll run the cable according to that smart plan. Are there any tips or tricks that you'd like to throw out here, Scott?
No, you can just see that the nails or screws, whatever they were done here, this is actually done to the plan that was shown that we just showed you. So you can see that strip is 4.5 inches from the wall. They've put a screw every 4 inches on the cable fixing strips. And just keep in mind, look for that dot. Once you get into
Yes.
the plan and all of a sudden you see the white dot should be there, you need to, you're going to be off a foot or two. It's okay to be, oh, I landed 1 foot before the red dot shows on the plan. That's all right. That's not a big deal. But if your red dot's here and your cable is 4 or 5 runs before that or 4 or 5 runs after it, it's going to be, hey, you know what? Your spacing is going to be wrong. You're either going to not have enough or you're going to have too much.
So once the cable has been run, you want to make sure that you are securing it to the subfloor. This is especially important if you're going to be using self-leveling concrete, but it's also important if you're using thin set, because obviously you just want to make sure that these stay in place, and it's pretty simple to secure them. All you need to do is tape them down every few feet. You can use masking tape. It looks like here duct tape was used. So you just want to make sure that they're held in place just for the time being while you embed them in whatever you're going to be embedding them in.
Yeah, you don't have to use 3 inch tape. You can really use 3/4 inch. It just enough to hold it in place because if you pour self-leveling over it, it's going to float to the top.
Yes.
So you need to really, really pay attention to that because you could run into trouble. And we talk to people all the time that do that.
Yes, it's definitely easy to do and is going to save you a headache in the long run. And then from there, you'll basically tile over the floor as you normally would. And we'll go into tiling over TempZone in just a little bit. But this shows the actual cost breakdown of that smart plan that we showed earlier. So this was a 375 linear foot cable, and at 3 inch spacing, that covers just over 93 square feet. And the MSRP for this is about $689. And as you can see, the fixing strips are using cable with fixing strips is going to save on average about 37% on overall cost. So if budget is really tight or pricing is important, then you want to make sure that you're considering TempZone Cable. Keep in mind also these fixing strips, when you purchase TempZone Cable from us, are going to come free. Otherwise, they're $1 each. So they will come basically free with that cable and will provide you with plenty to cover that space. So moving on to TempZone Flex Rolls, these are some of our most popular products that we see used the most. And this is the project we're going to go over shows 120 volt TempZone Flex Roll. Again, 123 square feet of space, and it actually heated about 90 square feet. The total wattage is 1,346 watts, 11 amps, and it's still using just that one 15 amp, 120 volt non-GFI breaker. And this is going to be the same room, and it's going to kind of show the same operating cost as well. So you can see even with using TempZone Flex Rolls or cable, you're still going to walk away with similar power requirements and similar operating costs because it's still going to be that 3 inch spacing. So this is the smart plan for that same earlier room, but with a TempZone Flex Roll. So can you kind of tell us what we're looking at here? I think for some people, this can be a little daunting at first.
Well, yeah, it's just a cut and turn, and the wires are 3 inch spacing, and there's a loop at this side that goes from here to here. Then on the other side, there's a loop that goes from here to here, which means when you're here, you can only turn right. When the loop is on this side, you can only turn that direction. When the loop is on this side, you can only turn that direction. So you want to watch out for that. That's why it says 3 feet exactly to turn left. You can't go 3 feet 3 inches and turn left because at 3 feet 3 inches, you can only turn right. So there is no left turn at 3 feet 3 inches. We see a lot of people that are on their first floor and they say, I need this run to be 3 feet 3 inches instead of 3 feet, and I need it to turn left. It can't happen. It's physically impossible. So that's why our plan is going to show you that. These are the people that call up the first time and they want to figure it all out themselves, and they're more than welcome to. But why not have the engineer do it, because they do it 100 times a day, every day of the year. So you have to keep in mind you can only turn right when the loop is on that side, and you can only turn left when the loop is on that side. And if you look there in that toilet room, Lynn, you can see the freeform areas. The freeform areas are where you actually have to take the wire off of the mesh. And that's where it gets a little more time consuming with this product. Is it's great for big flat areas, but when you have to start going through doorways, you're going to have to take the wire off of the mesh, which means it's pretty easy. There's only tape holding it. You pull the tape up and you pull the cable off, but then you have to use hot glue to hold it down as it makes its as it makes its turn, because you still have to have the wire 3 inch spacing, but you don't have any strips to use. So you have to physically hot glue it down in those areas where you go through the doorway there. So you can see there's a 3 in a square on the right side. That 3 inches in a square means you're taking 3 inches of mesh, you're cutting the mesh, and you're taking the wire off of it. And that's going into that area. So that loose wire is 1.5 feet, because remember, each length of wire is 1.5 feet, and it's on a 3 inch strip. So if you take 3 inches of mesh away, you're left with one run of cable, and the run of cable from left side to right side is 1.5 feet. So they're using 1.5 feet of cable there. Then on the right side, they're using 1.5 feet of cable there. So if you look down in the lower right corner, you'll see a 6 in a square. To the right there, that 6 in a square is telling you that that 6 is actually 6 inches of mesh, not 6 inches of wire, 6 inches of mesh, because 6 inches of mesh gives you 2 runs of wire, and that's 1.5 feet and 1.5 feet. So now you have 3 feet of loose cable that you use to fill that space there where the 6 in a square is. Those are the big two differences between those two products. You have the triangle at the start where the T with the thermostat is, and you have the rectangle or square in the bottom right where the end of the product is going. And then all those numbers on the green mesh is the number of feet and inches that you run the mesh out to make your cuts and turns.
Exactly. And you can also see the coverage is very similar. You're getting pretty close to the walls again, usually somewhere within about 3 to 4 inches away from the wall. So it's just another way to get similar coverage, just a different way to do the actual installation. So talking about measuring, cutting, churning, this is going to be what you'd said, Scott, like if you have a 3 foot, 3 foot listing here, you'll want to make sure that you're cutting at 3 feet, not 3 foot, 3 inches. So cut the mesh between the loops to turn the mat. You want to make sure that you are never, ever, we've said this before, we'll say it 100 times more, never cutting the heating cable. When you're cutting anything on this, you want to make sure that it is the green mesh. And then obviously you can cut that to unroll it in the other direction. You can cut the mesh away to freeform the cable, whatever needs to be done on that smart plan, it'll show you, and then you can follow those steps.
And if you notice here, the cable is facing downward, cable side down. That's another question that we get all of the time. And also, as you're doing your cuts and turns, don't adhere them to the subfloor until all your cuts and turns are done. Because if you have to do some moving around and you need to add some to the end, well, you don't want to have to pick all the product up that you've attached to the subfloor and to reposition it. So you do all your cuts and turns, make sure that all your cuts and turns works and it fills the space. Then you can start adhering it down to the subfloor as you go.
Definitely. Can you kind of tell us for TempZone Flex Rolls how you'd want to adhere it to the subfloor?
Hot glue.
Perfect.
So, yep, you just put hot glue, and what you can do is you can put a dollop of hot glue on the mesh, and it's going to go down into the floor. And you can take a chisel, and you can use that chisel to spread the glue um, and push it down through the mesh onto the subfloor. And that way you don't burn your fingers trying to push it down yourself, but you can use that chisel, clean the chisel off, and move on to the next one. Put the glue down, take the chisel, spread it. You never hit the chisel to the cable. They never ever touch. You're just putting that glue down and smashing it and pushing it down in through the um, the mesh into the subfloor, and that holds it all where you need it to go.
Definitely. One of the things I see people try a lot is using the white tape that's shown on the mats to adhere to the subfloor. That's not going to normally be tacky enough to hold it in place. So make sure that you're doing something, again, like that hot glue or a staple gun.
Right.
So can you kind of tell us about the one versus two-step installation methods?
One step is for people that have done hundreds of floors, that have done hundreds of heated floors, because what happens is you take the thin set, the mesh is already attached to the subfloor. Now you take thin set and you put enough thin set on that to put the tile in. Well, you should have about 3/8 of an inch of thin set to give you your nice heat bed that your tile sits on. So it's hard to do that all in one step and not have a bunch of lippage, which is one tile higher than the other. It's very, very difficult to get perfect height on those tiles in the one step method. So 99 times out of 100, you do the two step, which means you put the product down, you cover it with 1/4 of an inch of thin set, then you come back the next day after it's dried, and then you can put some more thin set on it, back butter the tile, and set it, and use spacers or whatever you need to use. But that's going to let you get a much flatter floor than you would trying to get the right thickness all in one fell swoop.
Alrighty. So the cost breakdown for the TempZone Flex Roll application for this project is $855. You're looking at they used a 1.5 foot by 60 linear foot roll, and that's giving you again that 90 square foot coverage. So Scott, can you kind of tell us about what you should keep in mind when actually installing the tile?
Well, in this picture, it's great because you want to make sure that those levelers, if you're using a leveling system, that if they aren't going to be pinching the wire. You want to make sure that you don't get it under the wire and then pinch the wire up into the tile. So you want to watch out for that as you go. That's the one thing you'll see. Also, when you're laying tile, clean the grout lines as you go, because you don't want somebody to come back next week and take a really sharp blade and clean the grout lines out. Because a lot of times that person cleaning out the grout lines was not the person to put the floor in. So they are there to clean the lines, and they don't know that there's electric heating cable underneath it. So that's where they get a really sharp blade and they start going into those grout lines trying to get that excess thin set out, and they're going right down into the cable and cutting it. So what you want to do is you want to clean those grout lines as you go by using a rag or by using a sponge, or a toothbrush works really good to clean that area out. That way you don't have to come back later with a sharp knife and cut that out, because I visited many, many floors to repair them after somebody did that. And sometimes there are so many cuts through the wire because the person didn't know there was wire underneath it. There were so many cuts to the floor that they had to start over again. But that's a rarity. Usually you can make one or two repairs and those kind of things and not have much trouble. But that's one thing. Those people that come in to do those grout cleanings often don't know there's wire underneath it.
Definitely. And
And yeah, people always ask about, well, how long do I have to wait to turn the system on? And that's until the thin set cures. Because if you don't let the thin set cure, it will it'll dry too quickly, and it'll be brittle. And the more heat you give it, the more it's going to dry, and the faster it will dry. So you don't turn on the electric floor heating until the cure time has been observed. And that cure time is stated on the side of the thin set bag. It'll say this thin set cures in 28 days, or this thin set cures in 14 days. It's not dries in 14 days, it's cures in 14 days. So never ever turn the heating system on before that cure time is complete.
Good to know. Alrighty, any questions? I'm not seeing any right now in the chat. So if any questions do come up, we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping here right at the end. Feel free to type away and we'd be happy to answer them. So our next webinar is going to be Thursday, November 9th, again, 1 o'clock Central, here on Zoom Events, and it's going to be about some pro tips for heating with luxury vinyl tile. So be sure to join us for that webinar. We do offer daily trainings, again, right here on Zoom, usually twice a day, and often they're hosted by me, hosted by Scott, or somebody like that, one of our customer service reps. So we are more than happy. We'd love to have you jump in. They're usually about 5-10 minutes, learn a little bit more about our products or applications, and ask any questions that you might have. For October, our promotion is 15% off of our snow melting system, so be sure to visit our website for more information on that. After this is done, we will be sending out an email asking about your experience during today's webinar. So if you have any comments or suggestions, we would love to hear them. We want to make sure that we're talking about what you want to hear about, so let us know what you're interested in. And we are here if you have questions. We are available via phone, email, our website, however is best for you to contact us works for us. We would love to get a smart plan out to you, help out with beginning to plan your project, or answer any questions that you might have. And that's all we have today. So thank you, Scott, so much for joining us and sharing your expertise. Until next time, as always, stay warm
And be radiant. Thanks.